Welcome, Acting Commissioner Flores. Thank you for being here. 2 weeks ago, the Office of Management and Budget released a skinny fiscal year 2026 budget request. While we await the details of the full request, the focus of this hearing will be on U.S. Customs and Border Protection's priorities for the upcoming fiscal year. I will now turn to my colleague, the distinguished gentlelady from Illinois, Ms. Underwood, for your opening remarks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, Acting Commissioner Flores. It's nice to see you again. I would like to note that you've taken this position as a career official. You're not serving in a political capacity, so we appreciate your service and thank you for being here today. You are currently the head of one of the nation's oldest and most versatile federal agencies responsible for addressing changing and increasingly challenging issues. The enforcement of complex trade and agricultural laws and policies, securing our borders from illicit activities, including narcotics and human trafficking, facilitating lawful trade and travel through our ports of entry, and representing American values to visitors and around the world. CBP's work is made harder by our broken immigration system and Congress's failure to fix it. Since January 20th, you've also been at the mercy of fast-paced and chaotic directives from the administration to meet unfeasible goals that are putting enormous strain on CBP's resources and operational abilities. The constant whiplash on tariffs and new policies that are deterring international tourism are already impacting CBP, threatening our economic security and the financial stability of your agency. On top of that, the Secretary is commandeering resources for politicized security theater that has already put DHS investigations and officers at risk. The President is dangerously downgrading our relationship with Canada, one of our most important allies and a critical partner on trade and northern border security. And our Vice President is joking about detaining tourists who come here to enjoy the 2026 World Cup. The Department of Commerce's International Trade Administration reports that international visitors to the United States already fell 12% compared to the same time last year. And airlines are reporting that bookings for the summer are also looking lower. In addition to hurting the American economy, threats to tourism and trade impact CBP's daily operations because as international air passengers decline, so do your fee collections associated with that travel. The U.S. is now on track to lose over $12 billion in international travel spending this year, which would likely increase CBP's budget needs for fiscal year 2026, putting pressure on this subcommittee to find savings from other parts of DHS. I know your agency is already monitoring this decline and previously projected growth, but I ask you to keep us informed about how this may change in this fiscal year and the next to ensure CBP has the resources it needs. One of the resources we have invested in over the years has been the deployment of non-intrusive inspection technologies that are vital in the detection of deadly narcotics and cross-border traffic. There is much more to be done to stem the flow of these deadly narcotics across our borders, and continued investment in both personnel and technology at the ports is critical to keeping our community safe. I am committed to improving our security at and between the ports of entry and facilitating trade and travel. But I'm also committed to doing so in a way that is consistent with our values as Americans, our founding constitutional principles, and our responsibility to those in our care, including the most vulnerable individuals that CBP encounters, as well as the physical and emotional wellness of the CBP workforce. In 2023, CBP launched a pilot in El Paso, Texas, focused on addressing the concerning rise in deaths by suicide of CBP personnel and providing services to improve the wellness of the CBP workforce. This program is saving lives. Reinvesting in CBP personnel and their families pays off. I was glad to see that the pilot has since expanded and encourage you to grow and expand the program. This type of investment only improves operational readiness, performance, retention, and recruitment. That's important because hiring at CBP continues to be a challenge, especially for Border Patrol agents. While the Secretary touts a surge in recruitment, that does not translate into actual positions onboarding. CBP is also facing a major issue with its CBP officer workforce due to the anticipated wave of retirements that will leave a major gap in our capacity if we don't continue to plan and invest in hiring them now. I hope to hear more from you about your plans for addressing these issues and how Congress, and specifically this committee, can help on that front. Thank you again for being here today, and I look forward to your testimony and answers to your questions, or answers to our questions. I yield back.
Thank you, ma'am. Mr. Commissioner, when your staff has briefed you, by the way, is there any reason they're all frowning right now? And it's kind of early for the, anyhow, if they brief you, I traditionally do not do an opening statement. That's because frankly, nobody's really asked me to do one. And so I'm not going to do one today, which means we're going to go right to you and your opening statement. Without objection, your full written testimony will be entered into the record. And with that in mind, we would ask you to summarize to the extent you can your opening statement to 5 minutes. Mr. Acting Commissioner, the floor is yours.
Opportunity to appear before you today to discuss U.S. Customs and Border Protection's operational priorities and share recent accomplishments. As the nation's unified border agency, CBP has a clear and critical mission: protect the American people by securing our borders from threats, enforcing our immigration and trade laws, and facilitating lawful trade and travel. As you are aware, CBP's mission is complex, challenging, and all too often dangerous. Tomorrow, at our Valor Memorial, we will honor 11 heroes and all the men and women of CBP and its legacy agencies who died in the line of duty. Every day, many of our employees endure intense physical and mental pressures. I am grateful this subcommittee continues to fund CBP's critical workforce care programs and support our exceptional people. I could not be more proud to have spent my 37-year law enforcement career serving alongside such dedicated and talented employees. I am also grateful to the members and staff of this subcommittee for their unwavering support of CBP's mission by ensuring we have the vital technology, equipment, infrastructure, and personnel resources to accomplish our broad security and facilitation responsibilities. Today, I'd like to share with you just some of CBP's recent accomplishments. First, border security is national security. Immediately following the President's declaration of a national emergency at the southern border, CBP took a comprehensive action to expand our enforcement efforts, prevent illegal immigration and drug smuggling, and safeguard the American people. At our ports of entry, with the termination of CBP One app scheduling function, CBP's Office of Field Operations began redirecting its critical and limited resources from processing illegal aliens to border security operations. Since January 21st, immigration processing actions at ports of entry decreased by 99% compared to the same time in 2024. Between the ports of entry, the Border Patrol expanded its use of expedited removal and increased enforcement against cartels and other criminal organizations. We continue to experience a dramatic and historic decline in illegal crossings. In March, the Border Patrol encountered just under 7,200 illegal aliens along the southwest border, a nearly 95% decrease from March of 2024. Complementing these enforcement efforts, CBP initiated border barrier construction for areas along our southwest border. More than 85 miles of new border barriers are already in various stages of planning and construction, including a recent contract award for approximately 7 miles in the Rio Grande Valley sector. CBP is also working with DoD and the Texas National Guard to deploy temporary barriers. Along our maritime borders, CBP's air and marine operations realigned aircraft and increased patrols, resulting in a 71% increase in maritime apprehensions in Southern California. We remain vigilant across all our border environments and continuously adjust our operations as cartels seek to shift their activities to alternate routes. It is clear that during the first 4 months, the administration's policies, coupled with increased enforcement by CBP, DoD, and our Mexican counterparts, has significantly disrupted criminal activity along the southwest border. CBP's drug seizures have recently decreased. However, the amount of illegal drugs approaching our border remains alarmingly high, and we are intensifying our efforts. And finally, CBP was ready to immediately enforce the President's new tariffs by updating the automated commercial environment, performing targeted inspections, and using clear guidance to operational personnel. As of May 2nd, CBP has successfully implemented 21 tariff-related presidential actions, collecting more than $37.9 billion and tariff-related revenue. With your support, CBP will remain resilient and responsive to any new threats or challenges. We will continue to prioritize investments that strengthen our enforcement of immigration laws, degrade the threat of transnational criminal organizations and terrorists, and protect the nation's economic security. I look forward to your questions.
Thank you for your opening statement. I'm going to defer my questions until later on in the hearing, so we'll now go to the gentlelady from Illinois, Ms. Underwood, for your questions.
Thank you. Mr. Flores, I want to talk about the northern border and Alaska. I'm concerned this administration is leaving us vulnerable in these regions to focus on their preferred narrative of a crisis at the southern border, despite the facts showing otherwise. Just one of many examples, CBP data showed twice as many terrorism-related encounters just at ports of entry on the northern border than the entire southern border. Beyond a joint narcotics operation, your testimony doesn't discuss the northern border. So can you please share more specifics about how the skinny budget we've seen can possibly support what CBP needs to face evolving threats at the northern border, especially given the recent diversion in resources to the southern one?
Thank you for the question. So although our current resources and enforcement posture on the southern border is where we are today in ensuring that we secure that from getting to 100% situational awareness and ultimately operational control, we know that we're responsible for all the border in the United States, including land border, our northern border, and our waters, the maritime environment. So as we continue to outline resources needed and with the support of this committee, resources that we need in regards to technology, personnel on the northern border, as well as our maritime borders, to ensure that we have 100% situational awareness of what's coming across our borders. We have technology that we have implemented on the northern border, and we continue to look at new technology that will work on the northern border for us in regards to potential for communications, fiber optic cabling, northern border cameras that we have there, and enhancing our personnel that's along our northern border to ensure that we are gaining that additional 100% situational awareness.
Okay, well, given the known challenges of staffing the northern border, I look forward to working with you on the ways that we in Congress can help staff those hard-to-fill locations. Moving on, I'm deeply concerned about a memo that you issued on May 5th that revoked 4 CBP policies protecting vulnerable people in your custody, including seniors, pregnant women, and kids. One of the 4 policies that you revoked was on the processing of pregnant and postpartum non-citizens and infants. That policy is what keeps moms in custody healthy. It doesn't require anything fancy. In fact, I'm a nurse, and I can tell you it's really barely the basics. Things like a place to sit or lie down or an extra juice or snack for pregnant and breastfeeding moms. The only justification in your memo for revoking this policy was that it was, quote, either obsolete or misaligned with current agency guidance and immigration enforcement priorities. Now, of course, CBP is fundamentally not built for detention. But there are many situations where detention occurs, sometimes long-term, and it's critical that CBP have high standards in place to protect detainees and personnel. So tell me, what specifically about juice and seating for detained, pregnant, and breastfeeding moms is obsolete or misaligned with your current guidance and priorities?
Congressman, thank you for the question. So I would say that when we have 20,000 people in custody every single day, we have 15,000 people sitting underneath a bridge, and we have a couple of hundred large groups sitting in the desert, creating additional mechanisms to sort through those masses to ensure that we're taking care of the vulnerable became absolutely necessary as we sort through that population to make sure that we're expediting care and processing for those individuals that we have either in a facility or out on the border at some location. Today's numbers, we look at our custody numbers today, we have anywhere from 500 to 800 individuals in custody. We're seeing less than 300 a day come across our borders. So with those numbers, we can operationalize and ensure that we're not minimizing the care that we're taking care of those individuals in our custody. Because in that memo as well, I emphasize that the priority of taking care of individuals in our custody remains a priority for us.
Right.
So our ability to be able to get through, care for, and meet all the requirements of those in our custody based on 500 or 800 individuals being in our custody, right, we're able to meet those needs and be able to meet.
But Mr. Commissioner, if you remove the standards of care that offer basic criteria for how to care for a vulnerable population like a pregnant person, and that would direct your agents and officers to offer that individual juice or a snack or place to sit, if we are not issuing that as basic policy, then it might not happen. And so I appreciate that encounters are down, and that is a fantastic thing. That is something that this committee celebrates, in fact. But as you reaffirmed, you do have a baseline standard for caring for people in your custody. And so what I'm going to ask is that you commit to immediately reinstating this policy, or a new one that reflects the current dynamic with lower levels of encounters that would have higher standards for pregnant and postpartum moms. Will you commit to that?
So I definitely take that back, Congresswoman, as we look through this. So what I would tell you is that when we do have 20,000 people in custody, it was difficult to find space to allow that to occur. So we had to prioritize that in order to allow that to occur, to find a place to sit, to get juice or snacks. And we're still doing the same thing. It's just we do not have the space limitations today in our facilities to find a place to allow someone to sit or to have juice or to have those snacks.
Mr. Chairman, I think that this committee would be willing to find the resources to properly care for pregnant moms, postpartum moms, kids, elders that are in CBP's care. And I'm going to continue to impress upon the agency the urgency of reinstating this type of policy. It's not optional. And I yield back.
Thank you. We now go to the gentlelady from Iowa, which represents the home of the river buoy tender Waiakanda.
That is right, Mr.
For your questions for the acting commissioner, the floor is yours.
Yes, and thank you for hearing me out during our Coast Guard hearing yesterday about our need for a new cutter on the Mississippi River. I understand that you do a lot of great work with U.S. Coast Guard, and you talked about some of the interdictions already. So I just want to extend my sincere gratitude to you and the men and women at CBP for all of the work you do to not only care for those individuals, as was just discussed in the last line of questioning, but to really keep our country safe, to stand up to those terrorists, those transnational crime organizations, the traffickers who are taking advantage of those very people every single day. So thank you for what you're doing to help keep them and all of us safe. We know under the Biden administration, every state became a border state, even states like Iowa. We saw those consequences firsthand through fentanyl. We saw those consequences through illegal drugs flooding into our communities, putting American lives, Iowa lives at risk. So I'm grateful to the president for taking that action on day one. I mean, you talked about a 95% decrease year over year. That is incredible to see those numbers shift in the other way. And we know you need the necessary tools, the authorities to be able to execute and do that job. We didn't need new policy, we needed a new president. And we consistently heard from Border Patrol under the previous administration, you felt your hands were tied. Agents were telling me they didn't feel that they could do their jobs effectively, specifically the jobs that they were trained to do. So I'm excited to see a return to core mission here. So thank you for helping to lead that. President Trump's policies, reinstating Remain in Mexico, changing over the CBP1 app to make it the CBP Home app, resuming border wall construction, as you talked about, the barrier construction as well. Those are all established and proven tools to really help us to deter illegal immigration and, again, empower our frontline agents to be able to do their jobs. So which of the Biden-era policy reversals would you say have been most effective in having the greatest impact on enforcement, deterrence, and the safety and morale of your agents and officers?
So I would say actually enforcing our immigration laws and providing consequences to those that break that law. So our ability to get out of processing, caretaking, transportation, a lot of those administrative or non-Leo type enforcements that we had agents and officers doing on a regular and reoccurring basis, we're able now to get them to do law enforcement type work, to patrol the border, to create deterrence, to make those arrests, have time to interview aliens that we're encountering on, and develop further information and intelligence in order to continue prosecutions and to continue down the road in regards to closing off aspects of the border that were open. The other piece I think that significantly helped us is the inject of equipment, personnel from DOD, being able to have more line of sight, being able to have more technology, to have more coverage on the border, allowing our agents to be able to respond and intercept and actually arrest those individuals crossing our border. So we've seen.
Talking like automated surveillance and
Right.
towers,
Absolutely.
cameras.
So
that kind
our
of-
automated autonomous surveillance towers and that type of technology that we're using across the board today. The increase of what we're doing from aircraft and unmanned aircraft patrols on the border to provide additional visibility and reaction time for our agents. So those have significantly helped in what we're seeing today in those numbers. The other piece is the consistent messaging for us, not only within what's happening at the border and within the U.S., but two countries that we had seen aliens arrive at our border from. So that messaging, and the messaging obviously matches the consequences that are being provided.
Well, it's very clear with that reduction in numbers coming across the border, and to my colleague's earlier point about and making sure people are cared for, you're clearly able to do that because you have fewer people that you're having in custody. And I think that that's really important, that you can redirect those resources where they need to go. And again, I think that probably is a good morale booster for the workforce as well. Can you speak to a little bit the broader cost savings from the changes that have been made under the Trump administration? You talk about interdiction, deterrence, being able to use some of these automated technologies like the CBP Home app. How are those efforts helping you to carry out your mission more effectively? I mean, I remember coming down to my colleague Tony Gonzalez's district and seeing those soft-sided facilities that now we don't have to pay for anymore. So how have you been able to really maximize those savings?
So I think the first thing I'll start with is being able to get our law enforcement officers back to doing law enforcement work. So we've cut man hours there in regards to non-law enforcement work and being able to patrol the border, which makes us more effective and efficient based on using law enforcement hours for law enforcement work. That'd be the first thing I'd mention. The other thing I would say on the soft-sided facilities. So soft-sided facilities were costing us about $83 million a month is what that was costing us. So with the ability, with the numbers being significantly lowered, with our in-custody numbers, again, down from 20,000 people every day that we had individuals in custody, down to 500 to 800 a day, we were able to shut down all those soft-sided facilities. So saving the American taxpayers $83 million each month on the cost of that. So being able to take that be able to do that internally with the resources was a significant savings for the American taxpayer. I would say that in regards to the CBP Home app and what we're doing, it's a cost-effective way to allow individuals that are here illegally or undocumented to be able to get back to their home countries on their own. It's cheaper than providing for custody and providing for transportation flights with ICE, who typically does that transportation. So it is a cost savings mechanism that allows for those in the country to depart on their own terms.
Well, thank you for the great work you're doing, Acting Commissioner, and appreciate you coming to testify today. Thank you. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
The floor now for 5 minutes for questioning belongs to the gentleman from the namesake of the Uniroyal Laredo all-terrain tire.
Hey, that is very good.
It's a little vintage. Don't anybody think I'm giving him an ad. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I am impressed by that detail, and ranking member, thank you so much. I was texting Rodney Scott. He told me to be kind, so for the record, I will be very kind, Commissioner Flores. Couple of things. First of all, thank your men and women, blue, green, tan, air marine, and all the folks that work for y'all. Thank you so much. I'm gonna have my questions are going to be very specified to Laredo, if you don't mind this time. Number one, we have the largest checkpoint that needs to be upgraded. I think we already added $15 million. They're working on the design, but I like to make sure that y'all keep that on budget and on time, and that's one thing we need to work on. Everything else that y'all work on budget and on time, and hopefully we can follow the law on that aspect. And I'm worried about that checkpoint because it would be the fourth largest port of entry if it would be a port of entry, that checkpoint. And it's not only that checkpoint, but we got another one in Freer that's been on holding for a while, and we need that one too. And then I think Congressman Gonzalez has another one in Eagle Pass, I believe also. So if we're gonna add money, if y'all gonna be adding money on reconciliation, just look at the basics needs for our men and women down there, and I'll talk about those checkpoints. The other thing is the efficiencies. I know we just established a CT in Laredo, an office there. You know, the more of those trucking lines we can get in, the better it is, because as you know, most of the drugs come in through ports of entry, not in between ports. According to the U.S. Sentencing Commission, 86% of the people that are caught at checkpoints and ports of entry are U.S. citizens, not illegal. They're U.S. citizens or residents, so we got to make sure we get your technology working. So we got to get that non-intrusive technology working, and I know sometimes the footprint is not there for some of the older bridges. But there are some new expansions coming in. The World Trade Bridge in Laredo, which is the largest port in the whole country, bigger than LA and et cetera, et cetera. We only have 8 lanes, but we got the presidential permit where we go from 8 to 18 lanes. So from 18,000 trailers a day, you can imagine what's going to happen. That gives a lot of opportunities for the bad guys to use those trailers. We have the third largest crossing, the Columbia Bridge, which we're waiting for a presidential permit. It's the second largest in Texas. So Laredo has basically number 1 and number 3 in the whole southern border. So I'm very interested in the men and women in blue and the technology that y'all are looking at. And finally, the last thing I want to make a comment, and you can respond, is the cameras. As you know, FAA, somebody came up with a bright idea to put it all together, and the FAA was handling the maintenance. It's like asking Border Patrol to go on air traffics, and I think hopefully that was changed now. But in my area, 1/3 of the cameras are working, 2/3 are not working, unless if those numbers have changed. But to say 1/3 of the cameras are not working, I know we're waiting for upgrades, that's not good for border security. Last point has to do with contracting. You mentioned that, you know, the tents, and those tents, I know some were coming from Rome, New York, and other places. But a lot of it, when the numbers went down, I don't know what the right term is, y'all had this warm status. Y'all should have gotten rid of that, because we're paying millions and millions and millions of taxpayers' dollars. And y'all just got to do a better job at contracting and getting a better deal. And then just letting those, whatever it is, warm status going in. To that. And talking about warm, let me go to warm. Farm, there's a big detention center in Laredo, $280 million. I call it a woke type of project where for the sewage, y'all want to use warm. Apparently, y'all use it in California. That's fine in California, but the city of Laredo is willing to put sewage lines and work with you. This, I'll call it a woke project. I mean, just that warm thing. The rest is good. The detention center is good, but I would like to have a follow-up on all that.
Sure.
And I know we don't have enough time, but be happy to sit down with you. And for the record, tell Mr. Scott that I was very kind to you. He was very kind.
Congressman, thank you for the question. We'll definitely get back to you. We recognize all those projects. They are on our priority, and obviously as we get through ability to fund many of that, and some have already funded in regards to the Laredo checkpoint. So we're on track with that going forward.
And the detention center, what about that warm?
So the warm status that we put them in is because of the unpredictability that we had during the surges that we were seeing from illegal crossing. So we wanted to make sure that we were not going to be out of capacity, since with the new administration and the numbers that we saw consistently being down, we went through the process as soon as we could in order to scale down. And every one of those soft-sided facilities we no longer operate in.
Yeah. Well, this is a heart facility. They closed the tents, and we're talking about our facility. You're a congressional affairs person, is very familiar with that. I don't have a problem. I support that detention center. I just have a problem with the warm form when the city's willing to connect sewage lines to y'all. But anyway, thank you so much, and I appreciate your service and your men and women that work for y'all.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir. The chair now recognizes the vice chair of the subcommittee, the gentleman from Arizona, home of the 5 Cs, copper, cattle, cotton, citrus, and climate. Mr. Siscomani, the floor is yours for 5 minutes.
You're really doing a great job today, Chairman. All the personalized.
I'm exhausted,
it's
but go
great.
right
It's
ahead.
great. It's great. Thank you, Acting Commissioner. Thank you for being here with us today, and thank you for your leadership in this very important issue to the entire nation. I represent Arizona's 6th congressional district. It's in the southeastern part of the state, so in the border with Mexico. I've had the opportunity to visit countless times with your OFO officers, with the CBP agents and the AMO agents as well. And I'm always very impressed with their grit, even through the hardest times in the last few years, just how they were able to show up and keep doing the job in spite of everything else going on. So I have a lot of pride in representing them in Congress. I have a large number of them in my district, living in my district. So it's I want to ask a question here on an issue on the EFRS issue that we're seeing. It's my understanding that federal law enforcement officers face mandatory retirement at age 57, which we know, but can retire earlier if they have 20 years in service and are over 50, or even younger if they have 25 years of service. This applies for law enforcement under CBP, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And how many CBP personnel do you have who are eligible for retirement today? And how many will be eligible in the next couple of years?
So just on the retirement issue, just start with, you're correct in regards to, so we have officers, agents, any other CBP law enforcement personnel. So at the age of 50 with 20 years worth of service can retire. At any age with 25 years worth of service can retire in regards if they're a Leo. In regards to our numbers of retirement, so we look at CBP has currently a little over 67,000 employees in CBP right now. If we look at our current number of those eligible to retire, we're somewhere right about 5,900 individuals that are employees that are able to retire. Within that 5,900 that are eligible to retire, we have another 3,300 of those that are Leos, or law enforcement, that are eligible for retirement.
Great, thank you for that. Under the federal employee retirement system that I mentioned, there's federal law enforcement officers receive a supplement to their annuity when they retire to bridge them until they become eligible for Social Security at age 62. Our colleagues on the House Oversight Committee recently reported out legislation as part of the reconciliation process that would have required a federal law enforcement officer to work until they are 57 to receive this supplement. I have a huge Border Patrol presence in my district, as I mentioned earlier, and I personally know agents who, because of injuries, really struggle to make it to retirement eligibility, let alone the mandatory retirement age of 57. Specifically, when I've gone over on the far remote areas of the border, and I realize the terrain that these agents are going up and down. And I've heard stories of how their knees give out at in their 40s sometime, and even earlier, and the injuries that they have. The Arizona border is a very unique border, as you know, in the southern part there. Because of, again, the terrain, some areas you can't even build a barrier because of that. It's very different than some of the other neighboring states. So anecdotally, I've heard from these agents and their retirement papers right now that they're putting in because they fear that they will not be able to physically make it to the age of 57, which is because of what I just described as well. So is this something that that you're tracking on that with the men and women working in your department? And how might this provision removing supplemental pay may impact your agency and also your recruitment efforts and retainment efforts?
Thank you for the question, Congressman. So we track retirements on a regular basis on what we're seeing in regards to employees putting in for retirement. In regards to anything that is added or taken away, obviously Congress will have that input on what happens next on whether or not any of the language or what that language looks like in reconciliation or anywhere else. I can tell you from my personal experience, anytime we have or there is discussion about potential impacts to employees' pay or benefits, there is some impact to that in regards to at least our current employees, right? When you start talking about impacts to current employees' benefits and pay, there is some impact and concern from our existing employees.
Well, I go back to my district every weekend, spend a lot of time out and about from on the field in football games or at the grocery store and or church, and every time I right now talking to someone in the federal, as a federal law enforcement, this is the number one issue on their mind and what we're working on here. So something that we're addressing, and wanted to make sure what your thoughts were on that in terms, again, of the recruitment part, but also in the retention right now, given the numbers that you have and the ones that are eligible for retirement. This is the time that we need our workforce and our experienced workforce to be on this, and that's why I think it's important to fix that, and we will. So thank you, sir, for being here, and thank you for your testimony today.
Thank you.
Chairman, now you're back.
The chair now recognizes the gentleman from Aloha Country. Since we're talking about new states these days, not that it's exactly new, but the 50th state, at least some people believe that. The floor is yours for 5 minutes.
I don't know how to respond to that, actually. I've got some witty comments having to do with the 51st state, but I think I'll just pass.
I figured you would, which is why I tried to defer to you.
Thanks for baiting me. Mr. Flores, first of all, thanks for your service. I think I counted 37 years or so. So you've been on the front line for a long time. Appreciate your stepping into this role. What I want to do is follow up on a line of questioning that I had with the Secretary when she testified about the cost benefit of a border wall. And let me give you some context. First of all, I've been to the border 3 times myself. I've talked with many of your officers on the ground. I believe, and I believe it may be the consensus of some of the officers on the ground, that we definitely need to rehabilitate, expand, and extend the border wall in some parts, but not all 1,954 miles. I'm not going to speak for them, but that's my conclusion. So what I'm interested in is understanding the administration's, where the administration is trying to go and what are the consequences of doing that. So my understanding is that in FY 2024, continued to 2025, Customs and Border Protection was funded at about $19.6 billion. The skinny budget doesn't specifically call out CBP, but it's a level funded budget, and I don't think that there is an assumption of an increase for CBP in the skinny budget. But reconciliation clearly front loads CBP to the tune of about $64.9 billion, which is 3 times more than the annual funding, of which $46.5 billion is to build the border wall. So that means that of the entire reconciliation budget, 71.6% is allocated to a border wall in the CBP, which is twice the annual budget of all of CBP, $0.8 billion to border surveillance, which I think we would all agree is also an important part of actually securing our border. My question to Secretary Noem was this. That's a heck of a lot of money to put into a border wall. And if we've seen such a drastic decrease in entries into this country, which is good news, by the way, congratulations to everybody that pulled that off. But if we've got this under control from a non-1954 mile border wall, then why are we investing that much in a border wall? And so the subsidiary part of the question is, does that $46.5 billion assume, what's the assumption under that? How much wall does that buy, $46.5 billion?
So Congressman, thank you for the question. So within CBP, in our evaluation, we've recognized needs in regards to expanding border walls, not just the border wall system. So infrastructure is one thing. When you talk about infrastructure, an actual physical infrastructure, a wall, and you can talk about border roads and access roads, which become equally as important. But the border wall system also includes technology. So that means we're talking about fiber optic cable, we're talking about sensors, we're talking about cameras, autonomous cameras, and that all combining together and to systemize just a border wall system in what we're doing. So what we have planned for in regards to needs that we have, so based on support from the committee, operationalizing what some of those needs are in regards to border wall, border barrier, both primary wall and secondary wall,
Okay.
but it includes the technology as well.
All right, cool. And I'm fine with all of your technology, and I'm fine with all of that, border roads, and I'm fine with everything else in terms of, taking care of our agents. But I guess my specific question is, what's the assumption as to a physical barrier, an extension of that barrier? Because $46.5 billion is a lot of money to spend when, the administration says that it has solved the problem already. So my question is, from a cost-benefit perspective, what assumption are we making with the border wall in that 46.5? The wall itself?
So the wall itself, we recognize the operational need and the funding in order to build, and we don't have the funding for that. We've used our current funding in order to build the current wall that we have either in some type of planning or construction phases.
I don't mean to, I'm really trying to get to, how much wall did you put in to your projections of 46.5 billion? What is the assumption there? Is that the entire border? Is it half the border?
So it will not include the entirety of the border. So we have a little less than 2,000 miles along the border. So we recognize that there are areas, geographic areas and terrain out there where a border wall does not make sense for us.
Do you
So
know how many of those miles you are assuming in that 46.5 billion number?
So in regards to primary border barrier, I can tell you that our operational need of what we identified from a primary border barrier, we're about 700 miles of primary border
Okay, so
barrier.
that's the assumption in the 46.5 billion.
That's
You're
what we
gonna
have in
build
our
some-
planning so far, operational need.
And just quickly, what time frame does that assume? Because what you're doing is you're committing this Appropriations Committee to funding of that over time, which takes out of the other goals, which is why reconciliation and budgeting is a bad idea. What's the time frame? 10 years?
So what we have right now is just a planning stage of what our operational needs are based on whether or not funding is provided. When we get the funding, we will determine what the time frame is there, but we are working to shorten that time frame as much as possible.
Okay, thank you.
Gentleman yields back. I now recognize the gentleman from the state whose name I guess means friendly in one of the native languages, and obviously the Lone Star State. Mr. Gonzalez, the floor is yours for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman, and Pete, great to see you here. You've done a great job as Commissioner. Thank you and the men and women that work underneath you, alongside you for everything that you're doing. I want to start with, my district. I've got 4 sectors in it. I've got a small piece of Laredo, Del Rio sector, Big Bend sector, and El Paso sector, and each one is completely different than the next. Let's start with the El Paso sector. I want to bring to your, I'm not too sure, I want to bring to your attention that at Fort Hancock, the port of entry at Fort Hancock, the hours have been reduced due to COVID-19, and they never got returned. I mean, COVID was 5 years ago, and the hours are still limited because of that. So my question is, are there any plans? And I understand staffing, and you're trying to navigate it all, but it is seriously a safety issue for the residents in Hudspeth County that rely on that port of entry to make their way to Mexico back and forth. Do you have any plans to reevaluate our land port of entries that currently operate under reduced hours, specifically pre-COVID hours?
So Congress, thank you for the question. Good to see you again. Absolutely. So we do a continuous evaluation of what our operational tempo is and what our hours are at all their locations that we do, the 328 ports of entry that we have. So we want to make sure from an operation tempo that we're meeting the demand of what's happening at our ports of entry. So we do that evaluation, and we consistently reevaluate whether or not the hours meet the demand and needs on what we have. What we do recognize is that based on limited staffing and resources, that we have to put our staffing to where the need is, and then scale down operations as best as possible in order to ensure that we're taking care of needs across the board but ensuring that staff is dedicated to primary locations where we're seeing the need for increased staffing. But we do reevaluate consistently on what port hours should be.
Sure. I'd ask you to take a look at the Fort Hancock Port of Entry. Hudspeth County often gets forgotten for a lot of different reasons, and that is an important issue for me. I want to talk about Stone Garden. Stone Garden, I think, is a program that has been very successful. You know, for those of us who voted for the CR last year, we were able to get a variety of different amounts in. I know El Paso County was able to get 3.7 million, but there's a disparity in some of the grant awardees, right? Other parts of my district, Frio County got 165K, LaSalle County got 186K. All grateful, all good stuff. But as you're going through this on the as we're working through the reconciliation process on the Homeland authorization side, we put 450. Hopefully it stays, but we put 450 million in there over a 5-year period. I would just ask that you kind of evaluate, make sure that it's going to some of these areas, because in many cases it's these smaller counties that are still getting hit, and that leads me actually, before I go into that part, I'd also like to hear your thoughts on, a lot of times that's used for overtime, but equipment is one of the basic necessities, communicating. And in many parts of my district, you just cannot communicate with others. What are your thoughts on trying to expand the Stone Garden program to maybe just radios or having some things like that? Just love to get your thoughts on the communication piece to just the problems that along the border.
Congress, thanks for the question. Agree from a Stone Garden, I'll start with Stone Garden perspective there, that it's an important aspect of what we do with being able to work law enforcement issues with our state and locals in the county. As we know, like some of you, born and raised in a small border town in Calexico, California. So understand the need of how small some of the law enforcement is and the support needed, and the ability to communicate becomes essential, like in most situations, or regular routine and emergency situations. So what we can do in regards to the request, in regards to Stone Garden, we will look into what that looks like in regards to equipment and communication and what that is. A lot of those requests that they come in are based on the agency themselves, right? The state and local agencies themselves putting in their operational order on the needs and kind of what the cooperation will be on that, on how we meet those needs under Stone Garden.
Well, I'd love to continue to work together with you on modernizing the program. We just can't write blank checks and think it's going to solve itself. Like, how do we make sure that those funds are taxpayer dollars are going down to meet the need? And sometimes it's not personnel. Sometimes it is equipment, like communications. My last question is on the Big Bend sector. I mean, we talk about these other sectors get a lot of attention, but the Big Bend sector, in my eyes, is an area that hasn't slowed down, that continues to have a lot of foot traffic on a daily basis. You know, a lot of people are traveling through the desert on that area. In that area in particular, once again, it's not an easy place to get to, and I understand the population is low, but from a Big Bend sector, is there anything that we can do to help, some of the local communities? What I'm hearing from my ranchers is just, they have, like, for everyone else, they've gotten relief. That area continues to be a hotbed. Just in the Big Bend sector in particular, is there anything that we can do to maybe alleviate some of their high foot traffic?
So, thank you for the questions, Congressman. We continue to look at our high traffic areas and reevaluate that. With the support that we're getting, being able to put agents back to do law enforcement work, the ingestion of technology that we have and refocusing some of that technology with the help of DOD and the technology, the help of DOD personnel on the border to help close off some of those areas are all areas that we're focusing on. So we continue to plan for where we see problem spots or hot areas along the border, and we continue to reevaluate how we're deploying our agents, how we're working with DOD to deploy their personnel, and then what our coverage is in the air in regards to bring visibility to those problem areas. We'll continue to work towards 100% situational awareness, and that's our plan right now, to get to that 100% situational awareness so we can ensure that we know what's coming across the border. And then ultimately, in ensuring that we know what's coming across the border, being able to effect an enforcement action on that. The enforcement and deterrence piece on the consequences seems to have a good deterrence in alleviating some of those hotspots.
Right. Well, thank you, Commissioner, for your testimony today. Look forward to continuing to work together. And Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you. The gentlelady from high altitude Texas, which we may be the two highest altitude residents of districts in Congress. I don't know about Mr. Newhouse, but he's not here, so he doesn't count today. The floor is yours for 5 minutes.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman and Madam Ranking Member. Commissioner Flores, thank you for being here, and thank you for your service to our country. I am blessed to represent the beautiful community of El Paso, Texas, and I'm a native, born and raised there, raised my children there, and my constituents recognize the importance of our land ports of entry. I think frequently Congress does not. You know, we get a lot of visitors from across the country who parachute in, they visit the border, take their selfies, leave. When I have folks visit the border, I always include our land ports of entry because they are key to our commerce, to our national economy. But what I have heard long before I was in Congress from my neighbors, friends, et cetera, who work for CBP is how understaffed our OFO personnel are. And it's been a chronic issue. It precedes my time in Congress, as I mentioned. And the staffing model, I think, needs to be reconfigured. And we need to think about different things in a new staffing model, including, for example, the El Paso sector, where one land port of entry is probably about 45 minutes away from another land port of entry. And when you're shifting personnel, we've got to take that timing into consideration. I was so proud to have supported the bipartisan infrastructure law, which has funding for a port modernization, the Bridge of the Americas, in the central part of my community. And as we increase POV traffic there, I again come back to thinking about staffing. And again, Congress frequently focuses on Border Patrol and the border when it comes to CBP. I would like to hear from you, how do we address our chronic understaffing with OFO?
Congresswoman, thank you for the question. So our workload staffing model is something we've developed now over several years, and it's been validated. I think to your point in regards to taking into consideration the time and distance of some of our locations is an important aspect and something that we're trying to ensure that it is incorporated into the workload staffing model. Current workload staffing model for OFO, at least the last numbers I saw, I believe had them 5,000 people short based on current workload that the last time we did the assessment. So it's a validation tool for us on what the workload is. So agree that operationally, like the Border Patrol, Office of Field Operations is also short of the men and women performing the job at the ports of entry. And as you're well aware, in regards to the economics of what happens at a ports of entry in regards to daily travel, commuter travel, commercial trucks coming across the border, right? There's high value in what that is coming across the border. We continue to make process improvements as we, with your support and the committee support in regards to what additional staffing looks like, we continue to make operational improvements to help alleviate some of the stress of ports of entry in regards to technologies and way forward. Simplified entry was a great example of what we did in regards to being able to expedite traffic. As we look at trusted traveler and trusted trader programs, we have FAST and we have global entry, right? We have Sentry and those type of programs that today account for about 16 million people registered into those type of programs. So trying to expedite crossings across the border as we wait for additional staffing, hopefully, and funding for that to be able to fill some of those spots that we have, both in the passenger environment and in the cargo environment along all our ports of entry in the U.S.
Commissioner, would you commit to working with me on assuring that we have enough OFO personnel at our land ports of entry?
Will do, yes.
Okay,
Yes, ma'am.
perfect. I'd also like to work with you on Trusted Traveler because that is a high source of complaints from members of my community, including very well-respected members of the business community to, all sorts of folks from all walks of life. That program, when that privilege is revoked, it's like a black box. People can't get answers. So I'd like to work with you on that as well. I'm running out of time. I have one final question that is really important to me. We've seen the administration use members of our active duty military on the U.S.-Mexico border. How much training and how long is the training for Border Patrol, just very quickly, before they engage in border operations?
So the academy itself, I believe it's about 6 months.
And they get all sorts of really in-depth training. How much training do our active duty military get before they're put on border enforcement? Do you know?
So I'd have to leave that up to DOD, but I know based on my experience and over my career, we've had DOD at the border ever since I can remember.
Well,
in
aside
regards to-
from the Joint Task Force, I'm talking about the recent operations, where we're literally putting military personnel on the border to act as enforcement personnel. Do you know how much training they get?
So we do some cross-training with DOD personnel when they come on board in regards to relationship of what we're doing. And then they obviously, DOD does their own training before.
and do you
but
know how-
I don't know how much training DOD is
It's
doing.
literally only hours, a few hours. And so I need to publicly express again my profound concern and alarm at the administration's decision to use military assets, military installations, and now active duty military for border enforcement. So thank you so much again. Look forward to working with you on Trusted Traveler and on ensuring that we have an adequate number of OFO personnel at our land ports. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
The gentleman from the Great River State, which I guess is translated out of the Algonquin language for Mississippi, and also known as the Magnolia State. The floor is yours for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Commissioner, thank you for joining us. Thank you for your hard work. Thank you for your leadership. Please tell the men and women who serve under you how much we as Congress appreciate what they do for us each and every day. I want to tell you that the work that CBP has been able to do in the last few months has been amazing. We have seen a dramatic change along the border. We have seen numbers drop to historic lows, decreases of 90+% along the southwest border. And I think that goes to show the hard work of the men and women that serve under you. And the change that we've seen in the administration of actually allowing them to do their job and to enforce the laws that exist. There was a question by one of my colleagues earlier about walls and borders and why do we need walls? Why do we need borders if the physical borders along our southwest border, if in fact we've reached the point that we have today where things are fairly secure? But I want to ask you, in your experience, do walls work? Are they a necessary part of the border component that Congress should be investing in? And in those areas where we have walls or borders, do we see that we are able to redirect manpower to other areas of the border that have not been secured by those structures?
Congressman, thank you for the question. So I started my career about 37 years ago in a small border town of Calexico, California. So for 30+ years, we've been using some type of border barrier all along the border. And so in my experience, infrastructure, border barriers, walls, technology, it works. It provides us a couple things. One, it provides us situational awareness in regards, when you talk about barriers and technology, it provides us for greater situational awareness, which creates the ability for our agents and officers to respond to any event or event that may be occurring. The wall also provides us, gets more hours back in regards to, provides agents the capability to patrol and enforce more mileage along the border. In regards to access roads and the wall doing to prevent and denial of individuals crossing at various locations along the southwest border. The other thing, it provides us space. It provides us some time in regards to our agents to be able to respond to an area before somebody who crossed illegal disappears into an urban area, into a vehicle or other locations before we're able to get them. So it provides that ability. So it's a cost-saving measure not only for us, it increases our enforcement and our ability to respond and react and actually encounter individuals that are illegal crossing. The other thing I have personally seen, again, most of my career being on the southwest border, when you create a safer environment based on infrastructure and technology, that allows for border communities to grow and infrastructure to grow, business and developments, housing developments, and all those things seem to flourish in those areas where you have a more secure border.
And let me ask you a little bit about the Air and Marine Operations, the AMO. I know that in some instances, our A&O pilots are operating light enforcement platforms, helicopters that in some cases are decades old. They are well-maintained, but they're they're coming to the end of that life cycle. And so I want to ask you how important it is for Congress to begin planning and to begin funding the replacement for these aging airframes.
Thank you for the question. That is a critical component of our strategy on how we, in fact, get 100% situational awareness along the border. Having light enforcement aircraft in that strategy is an important aspect. We appreciate the funding provided to CBP so far in regards to being able to maintain our current fleet. FY25 budget had the inclusion of 2 additional of the light enforcement aircraft, so we appreciate that. And we look forward to the additional funding to be able to grow and recapitalize some of the aging fleet there.
And just very briefly, as it relates to the non-intrusive inspection, the systems that we've installed along the border there, particularly at the ports of entry, we've seen that the rollout of this technology, I think, has been, let's just say, less than ideal. The screening percentage, particularly of passenger vehicles, remains disappointing. And I know Congress will continue to invest in that technology. But just want to implore you, as you're serving in this acting position, to do everything that we can to see that these systems are installed, that they're brought online, that the men and women who are operating the systems are trained, so that we can continue to screen more traffic that's coming across the border. We know that technology serves as a force multiplier and will help us be able to better secure the border and particularly stop the flow of narcotics from coming into the country. And so with that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Acting Director, I've got a few questions before we wrap up. How's the home application to leave? State Department gives somebody $1,000. Do we have any preliminary data on how that's working? People signing up for that? What?
So we do have some preliminary data that we do have individuals signing up for that in order to take that. That's very specific piece, although we built that application, it's being run by ICE in regards to getting that through and the department in regards to applicants in that process.
Okay, so if you could have your folks just kind of get back to us, and it's not a trick question, so I'm just kind of curious.
Right.
How's that working? Some of the members have talked to you about funding for the wall, and I know that people tend to, well, it's the wall. It's like, well, there's more than that. But you got any ideas on, so are we kicked off on that? All aspects, fiber optic, the actual wall itself, roads, blah, blah, blah. Is that all kicked off as we speak? And if it's not, when do we expect to be fully underway on multiple assets of what people colloquially refer to as the wall?
Yeah, so the wall system in regards to not only infrastructure, but the technology that applies to that. So based on our current funding, yes, so we are making sure that as we implement new wall, it is a wall system in regards to fiber optic and sensors. So that's in our current planning that we have. In regards to additional funding that we may receive, we are planning to ensure that it is a wall system in regards to not only infrastructure, but technology that goes along with that, along with border roads, access points, where we may have the opportunity to build more wall based on appropriations.
Are we building as we speak?
We are building as we speak.
Generally, what are we building? The whole 9 yards?
No, so,
Cameras, wiring, roads, actual wall?
So wall cameras, roads, yes, we're incorporating the technology into the 85-plus miles that we have. As we get into physical border barrier type ballard construction, that will be incorporated into every piece of ballard fencing that we build.
How about buoys in, for instance, the Rio Grande? Are we deploying those, or is that in the planning stage, or where are we at with buoys?
So we have that in the planning stage right now. We have, I think our latest contract is 17 miles of border barrier buoy that we have contracted for.
Okay. The cameras in the FAA thing, we're not doing that again, right?
Right, so we are moving, so when we talk about maintenance of older technology, based on the technology that we have it is older type technology. A lot of times it becomes very difficult to maintain parts that get parts in order to make that type of technology operational. So we do plan to completely update that technology and use new technology to ensure that our cameras are operational and integrated with everything that we're planning for.
Well, some of the questioning here today has gone on that, and I'll just tell you, it's like I haven't had anybody approach me. If somebody else has been approached and said, hey, what we're doing now with those cameras and having somebody else maintain them is okey dokey. And so I guess my question is, we've learned the lessons we need to from that. Not that anybody was a bad person or whatever, but that dog ain't hunting.
Right.
So as we go forward with new recapitalization of that particular part of your mission, we're going a different direction.
Right.
Okay? The last thing I've got is I've got a concern, and I know there's some moving parts to it, but when you keep getting reprogramming requests to move money out of hiring people and moving it into other areas, at some point in time, I hope that one of the things we're working on is we got to change the way we assess and bring people on board, that hiring process. So I know that, and I'm not saying it's yours, but it is other federal ones, so maybe it's yours. By the time we get done advertising, identifying somebody, putting them through the test, going through all the drill or whatever, it's not unusual to have people say, hey, thanks, but I went someplace where I can start working 6 months ago. And so my question is, where are we at in basically rethinking how we assess Border Patrol agents, employees, whatever, so that we quit getting reprogramming requests, which basically cannibalize money that we're like, hey, I know you need more people, here's the money, and it's like, well, we can't get them on board fast enough. At some point in time, there's a, it's a credibility thing where you're like, well, we keep putting this money in, but it hasn't been used for that. So it's like, when we give you the money, we want you to bring new people on. Anybody working on a plan for this is how we revamp our whole hiring process? And by the way, I know some of it is, well, we got to go through OMB and their program or whatever. It's like, well, let's triage that. And if we can help you, then good. Are we doing any of that? Hopefully on new cameras, new technology, and oh, by the way, new program to actually bring these folks on?
Thank you for the question, and we are. So we've taken a hard look at what our hiring process is. We've taken a look at where the longest poles in the tents are during that hiring process, and we have taken steps to increase what that is in regards to from a human resource side on what we're doing and how we're doing things and when we're doing certain things such as physicals and testing and those type of things on how we can combine different things in order to shorten up that time frame. We're also in regards to recognize that when we have applicants and they start through the process, that assigning somebody, a recruiter or somebody through them to help them through the process, we have a higher percentage of yielding on-board rates and shortening that time frame from application to on-board. So we're increasing what our ability is for recruitment as we continue to look at what the funding looks like, ensuring that we're having a recruiter attached to applicants that are getting through the process. We're looking at what the background investigators, the need for background investigators, the need for polygraphs, and the need, what that number looks like and what our bandwidth there. So we continue to look at the entirety of that process down to locations and hard to fill locations and what we can do about getting applicants into hard to fill locations.
So the message is clear from the question. It's like, I think you guys have plenty of credibility where you say, we need 20,000 more people to operate and retirements, and we expect a surge and all that stuff. I get all that. Now that everybody recognizes that, it's whatever needs to be done to do that in real time, because with each reprogramming request that cannibalizes those funds, it doesn't look good in terms of, yeah, we heard you and we're trying to help you, but the money never ends up getting there because of fundamental flaws in that process. So thank you for your input, and we'll look forward to working on that. CBP has historically been an excellent partner as we work through the annual appropriations process, and I ask that continue for fiscal year 2026. We won't surprise you, don't surprise us, that's simple. For the get back questions that members of the subcommittee had today, we ask that you respond in 15 business days. I know you're busy, but this process is moving quickly, and so what I don't want to do is have the train leave the station and us make assumptions which are not based on factual information. There may be additional questions members provide in writing, and we ask you to respond to those in a timely manner. I'd like to thank you again for coming. Been an excellent witness, and the subcommittee stands adjourned.